You may be seated. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam hanoten la shalom. Blessed is the Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings peace, consolation to the brokenhearted. We are assembled here, loved ones, family, friends, to both acknowledge our grief, to acknowledge our sadness due to the loss that we feel due to the passing of Theodore Malek. But we're also going to take time to have gratitude for this most precious soul whose life touched the essence of our very hearts, of our very lives, who brought light into our world, smiles to our faces, warmth to our hearts. While we definitely want to acknowledge our grief and loss at this time for the passing of Theodore, we also want to acknowledge that we're not just here for our love for Theodore, but we're here for our love for his family, for each other, to support one another, to share our love, our feelings with one another. And here, of course, is his loving Beshert, his wife, Judith, and loving children, Dana, Alex, Joshua, and Dana's partner, her husband, Christopher, father of children, Wayne, and also Alex's wife, Kelly. And then for loving grandchildren, Emma, Samara, Amelia, Zach, and Ari. All loving family, all loving friends. We are here for one another as well. But first and foremost, we are here for our love for Theodore. A loving son, a loving cousin, a loving husband, a loving father, a loving grandfather, and a loving friend. And I had the pleasure of speaking with Judith, Dana, and Alex, and Joshua, get to meet you today. And I heard many, many wonderful, amazing, and I mean such beautiful, beautiful characteristics that I would want to say right away above and beyond a mensch is what I get from about Theodore and his life. But before we go into very personal things that I have learned and open the floor for family and loved ones to share, I want to share something really interesting that I was taught by the rabbi I studied with in Israel. He said, you don't even have to know somebody personally. If you look at the Torah portion when they're born and the Torah portion when they transcend, if you find a common theme between the two, you can learn about the essence of their life. And when it lines up like that, he said, it's a way that almost like heaven, like God is saying, this is a life who completed the soul completed their purpose of what they were called to do. So I always love to do this. So I looked at the Torah portion for June 6, 1938, and it's the portion called Naso. Naso means to uplift. And to uplift is something that I really understand that Theodore did. He lifted people up. But it's to uplift and to count them, that everybody is to be remembered. It's about counting all the people in the wilderness. And the portion that he transcended under is called Noah. It's Noah, where Noah builds an ark. What for, if you don't mind me saying it this way, Mrs. Noah and Junior Noahs and their spouses, it was for the whole family. It was somebody who planned and protected every one of the family through the storm. And they came out on the other side and they built new lives. So it shows me somebody who's the consummate protector, generous, loving, counting everybody. Because in the counting, it's whether you're rich, poor, young, everybody was counted the same. So somebody who counts, looks, acknowledges every single person, cares for each one, wants to protect them and to bless them. So I think it's very auspicious the way that lined up. Is really beautiful. But personally, directly, Theodore was born in Brooklyn, Maimonides Hospital. He went to New Utrecht High School. He graduated from Brooklyn College. He was very active with Phi Lambda Delta, the fraternity there, and he maintained lifelong friends, both from college and from the fraternity. And that says a lot too, to hold those connections throughout his life. A lot of people move through stages, and not Theodore. He held on to people that he loved and that loved him. He met his Beshert in 1968 at the office, and they built a beautiful, beautiful life together with 3 beautiful children, grandchildren, moving from, I think you told me, from a 2-bedroom apartment to a 4-bedroom apartment in the city. And then you share with me, Judith, beautiful sunsets that you would watch in Florida, and traveling in different places that you visited, and your lives together and what you built. And it's really, really beautiful. And other qualities, I thought this was really touching, that Theodore was his happiest at his wedding and at the birth of his children, each one. And that how much you all mean to him and meant to him. And if you hear me say Theodore in the present tense, you see in our tradition, his physicality is here in this box, but his spirit, his neshama, is eternal. And with that, his spirit is here. And if you dream about Theodore, if you feel his presence, or you keep hearing a song you knew he loved it, you hadn't heard in years, or something keeps sparking him in you, you're not going crazy. Because in our belief, throughout the next week and the next month and the next year, you might feel his presence because his soul is checking on you. His spirit's checking to make sure that you're okay, to share his love with you. So that's why I often use present tense. Other beautiful qualities. Theodore was social. He loved family. He loved his friends. And I also heard, besides family and friends, I heard he loved food. I heard he liked Broadway shows. He liked fine restaurants. He loved to eat. He loved to cook, and he loved to feed people. So that shows his way of giving his love. He loved the Yankees, had a laid-back personality too. He could be quiet. He was not showy, but he was jovial, had a great sense of humor. He was generous. He was giving. He was genuine. He was sincere. He loved to share with those he loved. He was strong. He was gracious. And he was kind. He was thoughtful. He loved his family. He loved being a husband. He loved being a father. And he loved being a grandfather. He loved being a friend. He really loved his family. And what I caught too is he was the consummate father to everybody. Biological or not, he would step into that role and be a father for you. So like I said, mensch is really a word I get, but another word popped in my mind a lot too. It really did. The word love, because I kept feeling that how much he loved you and loves you and loves Judith and his children and grandchildren, loves his friends. You don't hold on to friendships for 20, 30, 40, 50 years out of just liking. That's true love. And the love, in English, the word is so. In Hebrew, it's a lot deeper, because the root word of ahava is hav. For love, it means to give. And that's what I kept hearing, is that Theodore gave out of his love. True ahava, he gave of himself, of his heart. of his food, of his warmth, of his sincerity, of his generosity, of his thoughtfulness. He gave of himself. He gave from his heart. And that's something that we can all hold on to. We can cherish those memories. With that, I would very much like to yield this position and offer family, Judith, if you're comfortable to come up and
There's so much to say about my husband, but now I'm kind of speechless. Um, I do have a couple of things to share, and I think, that Ted and I met in the office uh, of a direct marketing firm in 1968. And I don't know if anyone has seen his handwriting, but it was really indecipherable. But I was able to understand it, and I typed his letters because actually he hired me. And he, as a way of thanking me, he said, "Oh, may I take you out to dinner?" And I said, "Sure." And he took me to the most romantic restaurant, Cafe Renaissance, okay, where they had the violinist playing. And he also loved the Perigord. We had our wedding dinner there. But that date was the beginning of a 55-year romance we had. When he started to take ill, I lovingly took care of him. We both took care of each other, which is, what a marriage is all about. When one is up and the other is down, there have been times when, like I said, in our lifetime where we just help each other. My consolation is that we will be together soon. As the rabbi said, he loved food. I pray there is a hot pastrami sandwich on rye with Russian dressing waiting for him in heaven. It's ironic that the man who loved food so much could not swallow in his last days, couldn't drink. He was fed. We had a dropper to put in his mouth, even that he would choke on. So the food that he loved, he could no longer eat. At this time, I know my children all have something to say, and let me turn it over to whoever, okay? And by the way, thank you all for showing up. I really appreciate it. Okay.
Hi. It's so good to see everyone here. I'm just so happy to see everybody. I know it's a sad time, but it's also just wonderful to have family and friends and cousins because my father loved all that. My dad, my beloved father, the man who was there for me no matter what. picking up the pieces with a smile and always there. He pushed me to be the best I could be. And as a teenager who thought I knew everything, he would say my ass was grass. And that silly phrase put me in my place, but it also made me laugh. And let me tell you, my ass was grass a lot. I have a long memory of my dad, as we all do with food. Lots of the best foods, Zabars, fine dining, pastrami on rye. He made everything into a sandwich. We could be at the fanciest restaurant and he would turn Chateaubriand into a big sandwich with mayonnaise and a raw onion and ketchup, and I'd want a big bite. My dad was gracious. My dad was generous. He was early to everything. And he would always say, my pleasure, and he would mean it. Sometimes my dad and I would be sitting around the living room and I'd say, Dad, I think it's time to order dinner or make dinner. But how'd you know I was thinking that? I'm like, because I know you, Dad. He loved his cousins. He loved his aunts. He loved his family, his friends. He loved Massachusetts. He loved Florida. I thought he was strict when I was little, and I was afraid of him. In fact, I'm still grounded from sneaking a phone into my bedroom. And yeah, he had a lot of advice for me. He told me to have good posture. He wanted me not to have a New York accent because he said that would be more intelligent. He helped me pitch for softball. He drove me up to college and we would talk about everything, and he was there for me moving in of places, moving out of places, not getting such good grades. I had a 5.5-year college plan and he supported that. He had opinions about politics. He was a libertarian and he had my brother and I pass out flyers in the building on 54th Street. He would say the government that governs best governs least. He supported our endeavors, but usually he gave his 2 cents, but sometimes he didn't. And his silence spoke volumes because he was the dad who I wanted to be proud of me. He had the softest feet and hands. He loved my girls. He gave the best back scratches. He loved to fill my fridge with food when he came to visit to Vegas. He worried about his family. After family arguments, he'd say, it's over now, focus on the positive, let's move forward from here. Even during the last few years, when he was bedridden and completely dependent on us, he was loving and calm and asked for nothing but a kiss. He loved fishing in Massachusetts. He taught me how to ride a bike. He taught me how to drive a car. He had sayings. He would say, you bet your sweet bippy. He would say, knock on wood. He had a lot of good sayings. It took my dad 20 years to read a book. And he always had a book on the bedside. And I actually think he ever finished a book, but he always had one there. He loved his grandchildren, and Amelia and Samara would comb his hair and they would braid it and they would pull at it, and he would just sit there and let them do whatever they wanted to do. And he'd give them lots of mints and he would sneak them to them. He would call Emma Licious. When anyone had a baby, he would send me to the most expensive baby store, have me pick out the most beautiful gift for them. Whenever I asked my father what he wanted for his birthday or for Hanukkah, he would say a pair of socks. He was always asking where my mom was. He was very protective of my mom. My dad just handled things. He handled everything. And until dementia took that away. And he never expected anything in return. He taught me how to handle things. And I thank him and I love him. And I love you, Dad. I miss you.
Yeah. Ted Malek, my dad, was a good man, a fantastic father. He loved his family deeply. He cherished his friends, was kind, good-humored, and generous. Dad loved sharing his joys with others and had, as you heard, let's all say it, a passion for food. And this translates to so many of us having all these wonderful memories of my dad and food. I have friends from college who still talk about some decadent spread of Zabar's he bought, or an epic breakfast he made, or a really great restaurant he took us to. A few of my friends, when passing through New York without me, would stay with my dad, and he would host them, and he would treat them like his own kids, and he'd stock the fridge, and he'd make breakfast, like all of that. I remember being like 7 or 8 years old and accompanying my dad on his food shopping trips. And I was a very finicky eater, but as a kid. But even then, I remember always enjoying lox and smoked fishes. So at Zabar's, I was his official taster. I'd get a sample of everything first before we bought it. Or just deciding between Nova or Belly Lox, or whether we should get the smoked whitefish salad or the smoked salmon salad. Spoiler, my dad typically got both. I remember like running between like 3 different bakeries on the Upper East Side. One that had the best babka, another where it had the best rye bread, and a third for the cakes. Yeah. And I definitely got from my dad this joy of sharing like food with friends and wanting someone to try something I enjoy. And if you ask my wife, like Kelly, you'll find out that to this day I can't pass up a free sample. Being a born and bred New Yorker like my dad, I love like the energy and the vibrancy of the city. But also, thanks to my dad, I have an appreciation for nature and the outdoors. My family, we were lucky enough to have a lake house in the Berkshires we would vacation at. My dad called it the country house, or sometimes just the country. We'd all pile into the Cadillac for the 3-hour drive. And the Cadillac wasn't the most practical car for the dirt roads as you got close to the house, but he loved the big trunk, and these were the days before SUVs, so he wanted to make sure we could pack everything in the car. My dad would mow the lawn and part around, trimming bushes and doing some ill-conceived landscaping, and he would try to fight a mostly losing battle to prevent the trees we had planted from being taken down by the beavers. And now when I wander around my own backyard with the pair of clippers, I feel like I'm channeling like my inner Ted Malek. My dad's struggle with dementia started over 10 years ago. It was a slow progression where his short-term memory was the first to go, and parts of the past would slip away. As sad as it was watching some of his interests and parts of who he was fade away, I quickly realized how blessed I was. You see, for his entire decline, he kept his kindness and his good humor. And for someone who family was so important to, it was such a blessing that he remembered us. He remembered his family, and even like my kids, his grandkids, Amelia and Zach, who were born after his memory started to go. He knew who they were, and he knew their names most of the time. There even was a sweetness with how happy and excited he was to see me and my family, like every time we entered the room. So you could come back just 5 minutes later and his face would light up again. At the end, my dad was surrounded by his loving family, which I am so thankful for. My mom and my sister Dana and her whole family worked so hard these last few years in Las Vegas to make sure my dad was almost always surrounded by family. An incredibly emotionally difficult task that I am eternally grateful for. In the last few days, I've heard from so many relatives and friends that have been touched by my dad. And my dad cared so much for the people in his life. And it's so special that we all knew it. We will all miss his kindness, his generosity, and most of all, his warmth. For those of you who are able to join us this afternoon at the hotel, we've gone a spread from Zabar's that I think my dad would approve of. Thank you.
My dad had a passion for many things, food being number one, and not just because it was delicious. He loved to shop for it, eat out with friends and family, give orders on how to cook it. He even gave advice on the best way to butter bread. But more importantly, he understood that food can bring people together. He was big on food and family and spending quality time. We liked to watch sports together. He loved to watch the Jets and the Giants and scream, "Throw the effing ball." He enjoyed taking me to baseball games. He took me to my first Yankee game, which I will never forget. We also went to Jet games, with his friend Mike. My dad taught me many things. He gave me my first driving lesson. He taught me to stand straight and walk tall. Whether the task was big or small, the lesson hard or thoughtful, it was all important. I think that he loved that he could push his son to enjoy a great many things. That he could awaken a passion within me, which would lead to my love of the Yankees, swimming, fishing, movies, appreciating the outdoors, food, and so many other things in life. I knew that he enjoyed watching me take an interest in all of it. I think he understood that the value of not just working hard, but to push yourself to seek excellence, discipline, and respect in all aspects of life. Whether it was food, sports, hobbies, or your career. The number one lesson that my father taught me was to always have a passion. He used to say, "You have to have a passion." I think more than anything that he wanted to share his passions, his love of life with those around him. But it wasn't just his interest in these things that made him a great man and father. It was watching others enjoy them too. Joshie loves you, Dad.
Hi, I'm Stan White's first cousin of 10, but in many ways, he was my older brother who I never had, and I was his younger brother. He was 14 years my senior. Saw him every single week as we were growing up. Obviously, our relationship changed over time given the difference in age. So early on, he came and was our babysitter at night. He was the best babysitter ever. One wanted him, not anyone else. And he knew what to do. He understood. He was the best mediator. He knew how to sell the right things to each of us. And he said, you're going to get me in trouble if you're awake when your parents come home. They sort of knew what they're doing. They were frequently going out, with other aunts and uncles, something. So I guess he knew something about when they were coming in. He made sure we'd clean up in advance. We'd get our pajamas on. And he said, I hear them coming. You're going to rush into bed, and you'll pretend to be asleep. And that's what we did. there were a few times where I was sure that my parents must have seen me running around the corner, like an ass, but no one ever mentioned it. My guess is that Ted had the game where he let my parents know he'll take care of it all and make sure everything seemed okay, no matter what had gone on before, no matter what chaos had gone on, of which there is a lot. So Alex, he has some training with me because I was probably the worst picky eater you can imagine. And so he had to deal with me many times. And so he got trained. And one of the things he said, "Wait, with me, you can put ketchup on anything. You can put as much ketchup as you want on anything." And so I had ketchup on absolutely everything. When I was in college, at a sukkah dinner sitting next to the rabbi of a Hillel, I got in big trouble because they served chicken and I started dumping tons and tons of ketchup on it. He grabbed the ketchup away from saying, "You cannot do that." Okay, well, that wasn't so bad. I still kept eating ketchup, but almost really gave me a problem a little later in life. I think it was the first time I was eating at my future in-laws, and they made kosher goulash. I had turned kosher when I was in college as part of my adolescent rebellion. And I, of course, they didn't have any ketchup on the table, so I went to their fridge to get ketchup. And they basically were throwing me out of the house. I'd never be allowed in there. You cannot, on our family recipe, for goulash, put ketchup on. But somehow that got pieced over and I was allowed to continue dating their daughter and learned, how to negotiate some of those things. Everyone had a strict way of doing it. You may find it hard to believe, but my parents cut English muffins with a knife. Ted instructed us that was dead wrong. You can't eat English muffins like that, and showed me how to break it apart. And it really is so much better when you do that. Now I understand. Well, I can't see an English muffin in a store, much less eat one, without thinking of Ted. And you'd think, "Oh, you have an English muffin." Well, he'd say, no, you'd have one, no, you have two, you have three, whatever. And every type of spread you can imagine. So for each were different in taste. I mean, it was incredible. So as everyone's mentioned, he was loving. He prepared for everyone to make everyone always happy. Ted himself, though, I always saw him happy. He was always smiling. He was always warm, always reached out to make everyone feel better. I can't remember his ever saying anything negative about anyone. Even when there were some things in business which weren't going so great, he didn't have a negative word about them. If he did, he would make sure that he'd sort of pass things over like that. So incredible inspiration. Now, he did have his ways of getting in trouble. Now, his father, Al, was an incredible jokester. Everyone knew him as an incredible jokester. You wouldn't go there and may not see it anymore, but they had these little buzzers, and you go shake your hand and you get buzzed and stuff. And all I can think is that some, of that just has penetrated through the generations on the things that we've done and the things that we've been warm enjoying about. My son, Jeremy, once had a whoopee cushion. We were at a big international conference, and he put it directly under this very stern French guy, Luc Montagnier, who a few years later won the Nobel Prize in medicine. And he had no idea what was going on with this whoopee cushion. And everyone was totally hysterical and trying not to show it in front of this, very stern French guy. And all I could remember as he was doing it, I said, "Oh, that's just like what Ted and his father did on all these jokes on people." There was a time when my father and when my wife's father was very ill, and it was at Sloan Kettering, and we had to go there frequently. We had young kids, and the go-to place wasn't far away. It was, at Ted's house, and he said, "Yeah, I will help take care of. I'll do this." He just did everything for us and made us at home, had us stay over when it was necessary because we had some other time we'd have to come back early, or once later on when I needed a procedure, he had us stay over so we could get there early. He was just always giving and thoughtful about everyone else. And as was already said, when you asked what did he need, he never really wanted or needed anything. He was happy being with all of us, being with family. One of the saddest things that happened was just before, a few years before recognition of his beginning onset of Alzheimer's, he sort of lost his sense of taste and smell. He went for lots of checkups. He went to Philadelphia, so where top doctors, no one could figure it out. What I now know, because I'm in medicine, is that is sometimes the earliest sign of incipient Alzheimer's. Now, probably no doctor's ever going to mention that because it's not certain, it's not predictive. But in retrospect, it was awful. It took away from him one of his real joys in life. And he knew he wanted to get that back. Everyone tried, to figure out something that could be done, and nothing, of course, could be done. But then he lived with it. He didn't complain about it. He went on and did things. So one of the crazy things he did was, he was mentioned, his political philosophy. And as a kid, he gave me Ayn Rand to read. I actually had to hide the book. Well, first it takes a while to read. So he really did read some books because he knew Ayn Rand inside out. And we discussed it in private because people didn't appreciate that form of conservatism. It's different from standard conservatism. But there was still, it was funny when I was growing up. So in the race with Nixon in 1960, in the apartment building I was living in, and I had also an older cousin, Harvey, and a bunch of flyers in favor of Nixon went up. There's probably not a Republican in that whole giant building. And eventually they figured out it was me and Harvey who would put up all of these things. But the person who was the instigator was Ted. So he was beginning to indoctrinate us and tell us about his philosophy. And even at an early age, he was one of the few people who took me on like as a young adult and talked to me about things and encouraged this and that. So again, negative consequences of things like that. So there I am in elementary school. It's pretty good in math. They realized I could solve algebraic problems in my head. They didn't realize I didn't know algebra, I just was quickly interpolating numbers. But no one quite knew that. So he decided to teach me geometry. I still remember it was Passover. I'm in elementary school. He's trying to teach me geometry. He keeps making triangles and puts this little thing to make a square in the corner and says, that's a right angle. And I said, that's not a right angle. I don't know why putting a square and making that a right angle. I had no conception of doing something theoretical. Well, Ted was the first person who tried to teach me that in math. And later on, I began to understand. So go ahead, a while into the future, I'm on vacation on the beach with my two young kids who are in elementary school, and we're watching the sailboats gently go over the horizon. And so what idiotic thing did I do? I decided to teach them something about geometry. So, how far is it away that the top of the sailboat disappears? They said, how can we possibly? Oh, well, we can estimate that. We can figure out, that on a napkin, try drawing that. To this day, my daughter can't believe, and she's brilliant in math and she majored in math, that I would try to do something at breakfast on the beach. Well, that's because Ted was always encouraging and expanding and taking people to their best that they could ever be at, encouraging. And if you didn't get it, that was fine. He'd try another way. He'd go on to other things. He was just always so encouraging. So throughout my life, what I was doing, he would be encouraging. So here's another crazy thing. When I was growing up, if you traveled half an hour to an hour, that was sort of a long trip. It's going to make all of you laugh, now in the jet age. But, we had aunts and uncles who never flew on a plane ever in their life. It wasn't until late in life that my mother would go on a plane. My father had because he had to go on business, but the rest didn't. So then when he decided to buy, a house in Otis, Massachusetts, hours away, everyone said, this is absolutely crazy. This is ridiculous. How could you ever do that? But Ted knew what the right things were and how to enjoy life, and that this would be a nice place to be with family and be at peace. And he did it. And it just struck me when I was reading the name of the hurricane that's hitting Acapulco now. It's Hurricane Otis.
Oh.
It just last night it hit me when I said, wow, how are things and these coincidences, come about? There are so many other anecdotes I could tell you as reminiscences, which I think would touch upon you, and stories that you yourselves know. But they all echo this, same theme of, the most loving person on earth. A thing I hate most about the COVID epidemic that we just went through is taking us apart as family, making it hard to see each other. Indeed, part of the move from New York to Las Vegas was so that he could get the care he needed and be together with family. And I was very supportive of that, even though it meant that I didn't get to see Ted, after he moved away. And we all, as we get older, have our own issues, but COVID was certainly part of it. My wife is reminding me that I've gone on. It sounds like I've covered a couple of the things that she had wanted me to touch upon well enough. And so I'm glad we're all together today. Very sorry about the reason that has brought us together. But I hope for many more occasions when we're all together again. He loved everyone deeply in his family. Told me and my wife that all the time. Oh, I have one more anecdote I have to tell. One more. Before I married my wife, Judy took her aside and decided to lecture her about our family. I'm lucky that despite that lecture, Robin still managed to marry me. At least she admits that she was informed in advance. And it brought Robin and Judy, very close together, forever from that point. So very appreciative of that, Judy, and that you didn't discourage her from marrying me. You just got her informed. So thank you. And thank you, Rabbi, for a wonderful. Thank you.
So we're going to tag team here. Good morning, everyone. For those of you, I can't even speak, it's already starting. For those of you who may not know us, I'm Heather.
I'm Danielle.
And we've been best friends with Dana since we're 12.
Today we gather not only to mourn the passing of a great man, but to celebrate the life of a very kind and generous individual who touched our hearts in so many ways. We are here to remember Ted, who was not just a father to his own, but also to us, and the impact he had on our lives. We met the Malek crew in 7th grade, just having started middle school at York Prep on the Upper East Side.
Ted to us was like a second father, and we literally grew up in the Malek house as his second home. Whether it was spending endless hours in their kitchen, talking about life and boys and sharing stories and making silly faces, which usually turned into these epic long weekend sleepovers or weekend trips to Massachusetts, and always a holiday here and there to Key Biscayne. We were always welcomed and always felt tucked in by this family, like you were an adopted member of the Malek tribe.
One thing that always stands out in my mind is how much Ted loved a great steak or a delicious dessert. He had a passion for food, as everyone has said, that was infectious, and nobody celebrated a good meal quite like Ted. But it wasn't just about food, it was about family and opening his home to us. We were always treated as if we were his own children. He'd give us advice, share his wisdom, and occasionally even raise his voice when we got a bit too rowdy or loud. Ted was a genuinely good person through and through. His generosity knew no bounds. He touched our lives in countless ways, leaving a lasting legacy of kindness, warmth, and compassion. As we reflect on the life of Ted, let us remember the lessons he taught us: the importance of family, the joy of sharing a good meal, the value of generosity, and the impact one person can have on the lives of others.
And to add that Ted always greeted you with a big, warm smile, and he would say, "Hey, babe, how's it going?" It sounds so simple, but it could make the room and your mood just a bit brighter. So for all of these things, I and we are forever grateful, and will always keep a special place for Ted in our hearts and in our memories. So I'd like to close, if I can actually get through it, by reading a poem called "The Dash" by Linda Ellis. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of his birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spend alive on earth, and now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not much what we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live, love, and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things that you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that you can still rearrange. Be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like you've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to be rehashed, would you be proud of the things that you say about how you lived your dash? Ted lived a wonderful dash. Thank you.
Sure.
Well. Okay. I'll let this hold me up. See this? It's been here. Nobody said a word about it. Teddy was a veteran the same period I was during the Korean War. I am 94 years old. I'm just 10 years older than Ted. And we're both veterans. And believe me, there's a big difference between having been a veteran and being under oath. When we take an oath, we do not take an oath against a person. We take an oath for the Constitution of the United States, which is in stress right now. I'll tell you that we have also a national anthem. Unfortunately, everyone sitting here can stand up and sing the national anthem, but all you're doing is raising a question. Where is the flag? Is the flag there or not there? And so Francis Scott Key wrote a fourth stanza of this Star-Spangled Banner. And that stanza was, "Oh, this be it ever, that free men shall stand between their loved homes and war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heavens rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. And conquer we must when our cause it is just. And this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner forever shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. This was not approved by Congress until 1931. It started on the Chesapeake River coming up from Washington. The British troops already burned the White House. And they, well, we'll go up to Fort McHenry, we'll knock that off too, and we'll finish the job. And they went up to the fort, and they bombarded Fort McHenry. The flag never came down, and they saw it, and all of the redcoats, the English troops, left, and Camp McHenry remains in the United States hands, and did at that time, and that helped preserve our government. Otherwise, it would have been back to a colony again, because England was so messed up with chasing Napoleon over Europe. They had no time for us over here, thank God. Okay, and I want to tell you that I love Teddy a great deal. His cousin of mine, understand that his father and my father were brothers. So we're talking about a wide range of years in relation to what Teddy is being with us in spirit and in hope and in restoration for our thinking and our benefits, which we wish to endeavor and provide for our children. I thank you very much for getting this reception from me. Understand, this is family stuff. Also, Teddy is he was the youngest of 5 children, of 9 children. There were 5 brothers and 4 sisters in his family when he grew up. Would you believe? Okay, I'm talking about his uncle Al. I'm talking about his father. Okay? Okay. I'm going to manage very well. You don't have to hold me on the way over. Thank you very much. Don't push. I'll make it.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your words, but more specifically, sharing your hearts. And for those who didn't share, in our tradition with Theodore, Ted, dad, granddad, husband, his spirit being here, he knows what you're feeling, he knows what you're thinking, and he knows your love for him. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our heart be acceptable before you, Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. For Theodore's love that united each one of us in life, death cannot sever. For his companionship that we share on life's path, which continues through the tenderness of his memory. For the gifts of Theodore's heart, his mind, his character. For his spirit, which brought us happiness, joy. All of these are the most precious of remembrances. In times of grief, we listen to our sacred scripture. These sacred scriptures tell us messages of God that come to us in times of life, or unfortunately, times of death, in times of joy, and in times of sorrow. The most famous Tehillim psalm that I would like to share is the 23rd Psalm. It talks about our life here in physicality, where we have mercy, where we have goodness. It also talks about the soul's, what's called an aliyah, ascendancy of goodness and mercy. I'm going to read it in the plural because we're here as a group in plurality. The Lord is our shepherd, and we shall not want. He maketh us to lie down in green pastures and leads us beside still waters. He restores our souls and leads us in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil, for thou art with us. Your rod and your staff comforts us. You prepare a table before us in the presence of our enemies, and our cups runneth over. Surely goodness, chesed, loving kindness, shall follow us all the days of our life. We will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And then the last thing I would like to share is a prayer. Grant consolation, Most High, O Lord, to all family members, all loved ones, all who mourn. Bring healing to their hurt. Sustain their faith. May the memory of their beloved Beshert, Tati, father, grandfather, friend, cousin, I don't want to mess her, but all these roles of beloved Ted. May his memory be a blessing, and all your memories of him be most precious, that we share with each other, not just today, not just during the week of Shiva, but all throughout the years. When he crosses your mind, call each other, talk about him, keep him alive, keep your memories and your hearts alive with him. May we see his life as a reminder of what is good in the world, enduring in the world, precious in the world, loving in the world, joyful in the world, thoughtful, beautiful. And may we devote ourselves to the task of not just keeping his memory alive, but all those parts that we learned from him that made us better people, that we keep those alive and continue being a light that keeps our love alive for him as well. Amen. So this will conclude the chapel service, and then we'll be going to Beth Moses, right? To Beth Moses. We'll be heading out there now. If you're going, then please line up, and we'll continue graveside ceremony there.
We'll be hosting some people back at our hotel
Okay.
after that, if you want to come.
Sure. And afterwards,
It's at 155 East 50th Street.
150.
I'll let people know.
Oh,
So-
okay.
And they know.
Okay, but so Shiva for sure, 155
East 50th.
East
Street.
50th Street. Afterwards,
tomorrow.
please, and today and tomorrow, please, if you're able to make it, come share your love.